kind of ties into the fact that like not only is this a almost like a denouncement of war, it's like it's not just white people that are suffering, even like African Americans are suffering. Do you see everyone's affected?
Very good, thank you.
I feel like it can be both, especially depending on like what the real narrative of the photo is. Like, yes, there's devastation, but also the fact that this black guy is in here is really just making me think many things. Like depending on what he's doing, like if that is his buddy, it can kind of come off as like, oh, you know, even African Americans fight for this country, you know, like we're all here, we're all suffering for our country. And that could be seen as like a noble thing.
And we're all brothers on the battlefield.
Yeah, exactly. We're all suffering on the battlefield. And I feel like that was something that was a big deal to try and get Black people to fight for this country at this time, especially. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm dying to know like what that hand holding him back is for.
Oh gosh, now I have to
Hey Furman, do you know if like enlistment was part of this thing right now, or if it was like just
there's a
volunteers?
caption down here. Sorry, I'll put the caption up. I don't know. Here, I just realized, Jay, I was really negligent. There's a little caption underneath, and it says, photographed a wounded Jeremiah Purdy reaching toward a stricken soldier after a firefight, commonly known as reaching out. This is called reaching out. Interesting. And this was from Life magazine. So Life magazine was owned by Time magazine. And if you guys knew about it, maybe your grandparents had subscriptions. And it was not directed at specific at enlisting. I don't know, would this have helped with enlisting? I'm not sure. I kind of feel like this is more critical than anything.
It also said in the caption that it wasn't published until 5 years later because I think the photographer had been killed.
Oh, interesting. I really should read these things. Excuse me.
I was only asking about the enlistment because enlistment is like a super negative thing to like in any country to do.
Yeah.
And not only if enlistment was a thing, you would be more pressed to bring up public opinion, especially with like presidency and re-election.
Yes.
Like this could have like, yeah, that's why I was asking.
Actually, the photographer is Larry Burroughs. I think Sontag talks about him, that he was killed in his helicopter. Well, the thing is that, you know, why photo and video and TV journalism during Vietnam is so important is because it is largely credited with turning the public against the war, which was not the case in World War II. I should have pulled up some iconic images from World War II, but they're not nearly as gruesome or gory or critical of, you know, of what's going on. You know, this image here, this next one, this is considered to be one of the most damning images of the Vietnam War, right? This is the caption. Children running from a site of a Vietnam napalm attack. A South Vietnamese plane accidentally dropped napalm on its own troops, civilians in the middle. 9-year-old girl ripped off her burning clothes when she ran. The image communicated the horrors of war and contributed to U.S. anti-war sentiment. So he took a photograph of them and then he took them to the hospital. I don't know how you feel about that. Ethics.
I was gonna make a joke in very bad taste, which is like, how about that selfie culture? I'm sorry, I'm done.
And this girl now has grown up as a woman, and I saw a recent pictorial and interview with her. But you know, and then this is the other one that is very critical. And actually, if you've seen this before, this is actually part of a series. He took a series of photos, one after the other, of him shooting this man. And the next image, the blood is coming out the other side, and then he's falling to the ground. It's really, really graphic. Let me see what the caption says here. Killing a Viet Cong suspect in 1968. He later regretted the impact of the Pulitzer Prize winning image, apologizing to the general's family. I'm saying what he did was right, but you have to put yourself in his position. Is there a title? I don't see a title. Okay. So many of these images in Vietnam, they did a lot of damage to the war effort. But so did, so did the television, quite frankly. There were famous video feeds, of journalists right at, behind the bunkers, right in the bunkers in the Vietnam War. I remember an interview was on one of the major channels. I was a baby at the time, but I saw it later. The soldier who was firing over the barricades, he was being interviewed at the very same time by a photojournalist. It was kind of crazy, how they got in there.
Well, that's
Yep.
also kind of goes into like the heroics that we were talking about last week, where it's like the more risky they were, the more celebrated they were. And thus then their egos continued to be, pummeled. And I remember reading extensively about kind of the psychology of like war photographers in the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Just like this, there were kind of like these two categories of photographers. Ones that were like almost like adrenaline fueled, like addicts to pushing the extremism of like how dangerous they'd place themselves, like how risky they'd get. And then others that were like, had some type of boundary of like, this is just a job. Like, I don't want to not see my kids grow up. I want to like come home, this kind of like two categories of like war photographers.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments about any of these pictures here? Good. Let me make sure I'm recording good. Sorry, I apologize, guys. I started recording a little bit late here. So if you ever want to see the video of this, it'll be a little bit start weird. Anyway, good. Yeah, I want to follow on one point that Babette made a few minutes ago, because I kind of have this suspicion myself. When I read Sontag, and she talks about photos as memory freeze frames, I'm like, yeah, that's how I maybe memory is the wrong word, but like, that's how I have been told by society to remember World War II. I remember it in a series of images. And that's how I've been told by my culture to remember the Vietnam War. I remember it in terms of those iconic images we just saw there a minute ago. The Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. There's a couple of images that pop into my mind immediately. And then I don't know where we go from there. 9/11, I was submitting that's another incident where I have a couple of images in my mind. Some of them were not officially sanctioned, though. I'll show you. Some of them never even made it into the mainstream press, and that's interesting to see why. But I was thinking about this morning as I was reading about, the U.S. government is pulling its troops out of Afghanistan. Finally, supposedly, they're ending the war. The Afghan war, 20 years long, the longest war in U.S. history. Right? It's the longest war in U.S. history. And what are the iconic images of that war that come to mind? I've been talking about Iwo Jima. I've been talking about the Vietnam War. What are the iconic images of the longest war in U.S. history? I'm going to give you a polite pause because I'm going to suspect you got nothing. Because I can't think of any.
Well, I
Right?
don't remember a photograph, but I do remember like the videos of like Saddam Hussein's statue toppling.
Well, that was Iraq.
Right. So it wasn't even, but like, just like, it's like, that's to me what like signifies, at least in my lifespan, like the Middle East, period.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, actually, a good point about Iraq. That is a good one, by the way. There are a couple images from that war that might be iconic. I'm thinking of the Black Hawk soldiers hanging from the bridge there in Fallujah, their charred bodies. Of course, that also was not widely circulated. But Afghanistan, the longest war in US history.
I do remember a photograph of one of the soldiers with a red covering over their face and just patrolling. It's not really iconic, but it definitely is a striking photo. And I feel like I did make the comment of the photography and the ethics of like taking a photo of children who are burning and then taking them to the hospital. It was in bad taste, absolutely, but also I have to question the moral of it all, as well as the longest war in American history and what that could do to public sentiments in our home country. And like if that would be as damning as it as the Vietnam War was. And not only that, the logistics of war photography and compromising the soldier location, it also has to be taken into consideration, I feel.
Good. You mean to say, Jay, you understand why there might be fewer pictures?
I'm saying I can understand it. Yeah.
Sure. She makes reference to the beginning of the first Iraq war, which was called Desert Storm. For our international students here, you need to learn something. When America goes to war, we like to give a title to our wars. It's kind of like a movie. So the first war in Iraq was the Desert Storm. Anybody know what the original name of the Afghan war was? I shit you not, it was called Operation Infinite Freedom. Operation Infinite Freedom. And then someone was like, that's a bad fucking name. They're like, oh, okay. So I forget what they changed it to, but the second Iraq war was called Operation Iraqi Freedom. You know, I don't know why, what are you doing? Why do you have to give them a title? It's very strange. And there is another name for Afghan war that I forget. But the problem with the Afghan war, which I think the war in Afghanistan, I think Jay is referring to, is it's largely a forgotten war, unfortunately. I have had to remind students every year for the past 20 years that we're at war in the Middle East, you know, because for whatever reason, it's easy to forget. Why is it so easy to forget, y'all?
Because there's no, oh, sorry, you go.
Okay. I think probably because there's nobody cares, like really care about the war. Because
But why don't people care?
Sorry?
But why don't people care?
They're not in the battlefield. They're not in there.
They're not affected.
So, yeah, it is like a drama that happens in the TV or laptop. So nobody really cares, I think.
Okay, good.
And also, people have said that the Afghan war is largely like a Pentagon-driven issue, not necessarily like a national issue. In that it's like the Pentagon's attempt to like display that like if only you can quote unquote train other cultures to, you know, basically what they've been doing is like attempting to train Afghan soldiers to fight and plan and strategize like American soldiers. And it's kind of like a Pentagon manifesto that like this is if they could accomplish this, it would prove that this idea of Americans going into other countries and like training other people, quote unquote, to be like Americans and fight like Americans, then peace would be achieved. And so like even Congress is like not as involved in it. It's like this kind of like Pentagon driven situation, which the Pentagon is notorious for also being like extremely vague and not necessarily wanting to tell the public what's going on.
Okay. Why was there so much more general interest in the Vietnam War in this country?
Because of the draft. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's what I was going to say too.
Sisters think alike. Because of the draft. I tell the story to my students. My first job was at a place called Boston College up in Boston, obviously. And I was teaching along some old timer. And the old timer told me back in 1970, this is going to get very depressing for you all. I'm just warning you. They raised tuition. And the students got up, stood up, walked out of the classroom and went on strike. You want to know what they raised tuition to? $1,000. They raised it to $1,000, and students were like, "Fuck this shit!" And they wind up. Nowadays, Micah raised his tuition yesterday, I think 3%, and everybody yawned. The whole dynamics have changed, of course. But why were they so upset about this? Because if you could not pay your tuition and you were not an enrolled student, guess what? You were going to Vietnam. So that was animating the whole thing, right? Anybody seen the movie Hair or the musical Hair? Hair is all about the backdrop of going to, Vietnam. That was a constant threat in their life, and, your generation, at least Americans in the house here, you guys have been spared this. You don't have to think about this anymore. Just because you are female doesn't mean you're spared now, right? Because now women may serve. In the last few years, they've instituted that women may serve on the front lines. So you're welcome for that. Not that I'd wish it on anybody, but yeah, I mean, there's no more draft, So yeah, we don't have to worry about that war as much. Anybody else want to tell me why we care less about the war in Afghanistan?
I mean, just like going back onto the topic of draft, there is no public draft, but there is a poverty draft, if you think about it. And because we're so desensitized to all of it, that it almost becomes a compassion burnout or an empathy burnout kind of situation where it certainly is easier not to think about it.
Good. Yeah. The secret is that the United States is engaged in a lot of wars around the world. There was a guy on NPR yesterday, they were talking about the pullout in Afghanistan, and he said he had served there, and the host asked him, "How do you feel about it?" He said, "Well, I don't really, one thing he said is when the US says they're going to pull out of a place, they never really do." And he started to go over all the countries where we had been involved in war and we still have troops. And he went all the way back to Germany after World War II. The troops are still there. It's right. There are bases there. There are bases in Japan. The United States got involved there. They have significant troops in Iraq. They will continue to have troops on the ground in Afghanistan. There are troops in Syria, so, there's a lot of wars competing for your attention. And then I like the point that you make, Jay, about about this, how'd you put it? The sympathy or compassion, what did you say? Like
The compassion burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just there's a lot competing for that out there. It's hard. That's an issue that Sontag brings up for sure. How about this? Anybody know what tools the US government uses principally to fight the Taliban? This is a new war technique in the last decade, how the US wages war. You guys know what I mean?
A lot of it's way more like surveillance and actual action is not, yeah, it's like way more removed. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
A few years ago, I read that a half of all Air Force pilots now are trained for drones. A half. Why do you think the military likes to use drones? Anybody?
Because it makes the killing less personal.
Okay.
And
Why is that good? Why is that beneficial to the Pentagon?
yeah, not well. The only small benefit to the Pentagon is that maybe then there's a little less heat on them about the aftershocks or after effects or PTSD of soldiers. But obviously, largely, it's more affordable to kill via machine rather than sending troops in person. So it's a financial incentive for the Pentagon.
Good. Anybody else?
The financial incentive, but also with drones, you have less people who need to be there and there's less death.
Right.
And the less people there are, the quieter they can keep it. And this kind of goes into why we don't hear as much about it, I feel like.
Good.
And like with drones, if you don't have a camera on it, you can't really document it.
Right. This is how you wage war without a draft. You use drones. Our military relies on drones. Not only that, but they also rely on private contractors, believe it or not. And in the Iraq War, fully a third of all the troops on the ground or all the personnel on the ground were private contractors, right? So you have all these, they call these security services that are hired. Blackwater, that's the one that I was thinking of. You guys heard of Blackwater? No?
Yes, they're like notorious for, well, first off, being like the most elite and specialist and having like an insane amount of money, but also like some of the most problematic in that they've like, it's been impossible to have them disciplined or brought to justice for any of like killings they've done to civilians. They're like notoriously slippery and kind of get away with anything. Because
in Iraq, they fit into a kind of legal limbo, right? They argued they were not Iraqi citizens, so they should not be subject to Iraq law. But then the problem was they weren't exactly US soldiers. So there was a lot of problems there. But President Trump ended up giving them, what do you call it? He forgave them. There's an official word for it. I can't think. And the reason he was so involved is because the head
Presidential pardon.
Thank you. The head of Blackwater is the brother of Betsy DeVos, who is the head of education. Eric Prince is his name. I'm mentioning this because he's also pretty fucking notorious. And Blackwater was involved in a lot of like extrajudicial killings back in the day and got into a lot of trouble, and they were expelled from Iraq. He's had to change the name of the company twice now. It's no longer called Blackwater. I forget what it's called now. But this is a booming business, booming business. And the US government, when it goes to war, it will hire the contractors, then it doesn't have to draft. And then it makes war good for business, right? Because these private businesses are making money, and then it sends in the drones. The other reason I want to talk about drones is because I think she makes mention of this book was written in 2003. I don't think drone technology was quite there yet, but she probably would be very interested in drones. I don't know if you guys have seen drone footage. Have any of you guys seen drone footage? I should have gotten this too. It's available on the internet. You can see even like drone footage of a strike.
I have seen it.
Do you guys know how these drone operators work? Like what they do? I mean, sounds a little silly to, I guess you know what they do, but you know what that all entails? Where are the operators?
I mean, they're sitting in an office here in DC and they have, they're basically remote controlling the drones and also like entering coordinates and That's about it.
How do they know to get their targets, everybody?
It's like a mixture of intel on the ground and and kind of just general surveillance, drone surveillance that has been taking place, prior to any like
There you go.
designated
They have
situation.
they have to follow these suspects for days, if not more. Gosh, there's a show I was watching recently which covered some of these drone pilots, and one of the strange things is that mentions why the Pentagon favors drones. Well, you don't have to put human combatants in the way of danger, at least on our side. American lives aren't in danger. Screw the opposition. You don't have to endanger American lives. It makes it easier from a PR standpoint. And you can sit in an office. Actually, I believe one of the big drone bases is in Nevada. I read an article about them a few years ago. They go to work. They show up at 8. They follow their suspect all day. They switch off with another guy. You can work 8 to 5. You can be a soldier, work 8 to 5, do a regular commute, be home for the kids' soccer practice and dinner, go to bed, get up, follow again, make your kill, go home, blah, blah, blah. And so it goes, right? How's that sound?
The way you describe it feels like they're getting paid to play a video game.
Yeah. I even read that the Air Force was using video games to recruit, which is not entirely surprising, but that's one way it's been shared. Does this sound weird to you all, that this is how we wage war now, between commutes and soccer practice?
I think it largely decreased the guilty and morality after killing. So it's
The fear is that would make it easier, and that would make it easier to go to war. And indeed, in the last few years, the US government has used drones to attack countries all over the place. Drones have gotten heavily involved in the drug war in Central America and South America. We used our drones very heavily in Syria to intervene. By the way, where the drones are used mostly against the Taliban is a kind of lawless frontier on the northwest of Pakistan called the Northwest Territories. And that was, we were criticized for doing this because we never declared war in Pakistan, right? So you can go to war with drones and you don't have to declare war, right? So drones make it so easy. But I have one thing I need to tell you all. In the various portrayals of the drone pilots, it has been discovered that they do suffer from PTSD, and actually in pretty consistent, in numbers that are pretty consistent with on the ground troops. Why is that, do you think? And you guys know what PTSD is? Post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of going to war. They are sitting in their offices, their air-conditioned offices in Nevada, following these guys, doing the kill, and they're noticing that those drone pilots are suffering symptoms of PTSD. Why do you think that is?
I'm thinking about my points of morality and feel no guilty. But if a normal person felt when they're killing with no guilty and morality, it calls sociopaths. So I don't know. Probably it's related.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they're still killing people, or they're still participating in war or and I feel like maybe there's this like weird, I mean, I would imagine there's just like such a weird blend between like going like, you know, your civilian life with like your military life.
Yeah.
You know, not saying that being there in person is better, but like there is this like, you're like, okay, you're there, then you come back and you're like in civilian life. And obviously there's this, you know, that's not like a good, you know, it's still problematic, but I feel like there'd be a really, really weird psychological twist of just like driving home, you know, and then like being in your normal life. So maybe that is contributing.
Anybody else?
Oh, and if is there like a family or friends or probably their wife or husband understand what they're doing? If they do not understand and know they're killing people by just use buttons or something like that, they probably will talk some like comment they will comment like not good for their mental health.
Yeah,
Not mental health.
they're probably sworn to secrecy, you know. They probably are not allowed, for national security sakes, they're not allowed to say what they're doing. So they are living in a bubble, that's for sure. Imagine coming home, having killed someone, then coming home and not being able to tell your family about it.
Yeah, or
I mean,
they're oh sorry.
no, you're fine. Go for it.
So or their kids and see this news and say, oh dad, you killed this person or people or something like that, is weird. I don't think they want their kids like thinking like that. A kill person is a like normal thing.
Jay?
So the one thing that I think about when we talk about trauma, and especially wartime trauma, war and prisons are notorious for stripping identity and throwing you into the situation and into the mindset of being there and like being a collective rather than a singularity. The psychology behind that is basically you are if you are in the army, you are part of the army. You are a collective. And as a collective, you work and you are basically trained to be on the field to handle the trauma. And there's almost a camaraderie with other people with it. But if you're in civilian life, you don't have that sort of conditioning. You are no longer in that mindset. You can't be fully immersed, you know?
Right. Yes.
And once that happens, you then have the jarring situation where you have to go from military life without that socialization to civilian life where you have to pretend everything's fine. And as much as you can be removed from all of that, there is still wartime journalism. You still have to see what has happened. You kind of like, at some point, you still have to have some awareness of what you've done.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I think these are all great. Yeah, it's interesting. So Jennifer points out, you know, on one hand, drone warfare might be easier to wage because it seems you're removed, right? It seems you're removed. And the soldiers who inflicted the violence, they have less cause for guilt or concern for immorality. And yet the opposite is happening. Part of the reason I've heard is that I mentioned to you how drone operators work. In order to make a kill that's accurate, you need to follow that person for a very long time, right? So in some cases, you know, they've had to follow suspects for days, if not weeks, and to make sure that that person is like, if they have a family, then they get home, then they're alone in their home. Okay, you have to isolate them, but that means you get to know their family, right? And I just remembered the show that I saw. You all are gonna think I'm pretty pathetic, but it's the Jack Ryan show on Amazon. That's Tom Clancy inspired series with John Krasinski from The Office. But it's well done, and in you know, there are different characters showcased throughout the series, and in a couple incidents they showcase these drone pilots, and one in particular who is dealing with trauma, and he has to follow the suspect for a very long time, get to know him very well. He gets to know his family very well. He sees that this guy is a father with children, and then he has to kill him, you know. And then you're doing all this, as you guys indicated, in the middle of everyday life. You know? By the way, what we're talking about here, this is a candidate for, you know, a possible research paper. You know, this is something that you could definitely look closer into, the optics and the aesthetics of drone footage, how that compares to certain themes that Sontag raises. There's another vantage point too that's really interesting. This is less than visual, but there have been some very interesting stories done about the kind of trauma that the citizens have to undergo who live under constant threat of drone attacks. There have been stories about the villages in Western Pakistan. Apparently, I don't know if you guys know this, but apparently you can hear the drones. You hear them overhead. And the citizens who have, the villagers who have to live with this, they hear these drones overhead several times a day or a week. And it is terrifying. You know, when they hear them, they know that an attack is imminent. And by the way, are these drones, you know, accurate? Who the fuck knows? Right? No one knows.
There are multiple scandals about drones hitting civilians. Like there was one where they even hit a hospital.
Yeah. The Pentagon always undercounts the civilian casualties. There's another problem. Who are they targeting? We have no idea. These are suspects. They're not convicted criminals. They're suspects, right? And as I mentioned, these are not wars that are, you know, being waged in official battle zones, and we declare war on you. This is a very nebulous gray area. Okay.
They actually identify a lot of civilians as unidentified. That's how they get a lot with a lot of it. And also the drones reminds me of airstrikes, and that is jarring.
Mm-hmm. I say that again, I'm sorry?
Which part?
What you just said about the airstrikes?
Yeah, it makes me think of like World War II with the airstrikes at night and like the bomb shelters and all of that.
Oh, yeah. Good. Babette there's a lot of research and writing about ethical aesthetics if you want to come in from a philosophical perspective. Are you speaking, Babette, specifically to drones, or this is just a general comment?
Well, if the drone and kind of this kind of like political warfare was of interest for anyone and they wanted to research it, I feel like coming from tying that into kind of like a philosophical standpoint, I was just kind of suggesting that I found ethical aesthetics to be a place where there was a lot of writing and research in terms of references and sources, because it can kind of get hard to research this without it getting like super politically opinionated, like trying to find like theory-based ideas around this kind of topic. So it's just if people wanted to research this, that was just a jumping off standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would not like it to be a political diatribe. I would much prefer it to be in terms of the ethico-aesthetic perspective. It's a unique topic, though, of course, because, you know, we're talking about war, pick images of war now with the drones, but drone imagery is not widely distributed. You know, you're not going to wake up and see the front page of the New York Times and there's a picture of a drone footage on the front cover. That's not going to happen. They're available. You can find them on Google. They're, you know, I think you could probably even find some video feeds, though I haven't tried. But it raises several good questions that pertain to Sontag, which is, you know, the drone footage. how does that image impact what you're seeing? How does it morally infuse or influence your view? The question I was raising is, why does that seemingly remote image seem to inflict PTSD in the pilots? You know, there's a lot of, it's not that removed, clearly, right? Which is interesting, and in a way it could kind of pose an interesting challenge to what Sontag is arguing in this book, right? Because she argues at the end of the day that the photographs, they don't do a good job. They're certainly not reliable in making us feel about war. But these pilots are feeling, they are. Largely because they're the perpetrator. They know they're the ones who do the execution. But yet, if they're not enjoying any mediation or remove from those images, which is maybe something that the Pentagon hoped would happen, right? Let's get these guys playing video games, then they'll do it with impunity, and they won't care quite as much. And then we have no more. Then our psychiatric bill will lighten up. No more PTSD, right? I can imagine the conversations that went on between the generals. Anyway, any other questions, comments about drones? Okay, I do think it's a very interesting topic. I have written about drones in the past. It was a while ago, though, when I wrote my book about guns. It's been a while since I've written about drones, but I'm gonna pivot to another issue here. How do you guys feel if I share some disturbing pictures? You're wondering what? I'm going to share. I have two in particular. One I cannot share if you want, but I'll tell you what the images are, and you can tell me if you'd like to see it. I'm going to take up the issue of the images from 9/11. And there are two in particular. She mentions one. She talks about this picture of the severed hand. I was not really familiar with that image before I read this book. Do you guys know the point? The point she raises is that this image of the severed hand, it made it into some publications and into others it did not. Or it mostly, actually it was mostly, I think it was mostly barred. It was shown briefly and then it disappeared. Is that the point she makes about the severed hand? Is that correct?
Yes. She
Yeah.
says that it was shown in tabloids. So there's a distinction between tabloids and mainstream newspapers.
And I'm going to speak for the mainstream and say that image was really, I don't remember it. It was really not an iconic image. But there was one other image that I think did get close to being that, and those are the jumpers. Do you guys know about these, the 9/11 jumpers?
Yes.
Okay. So I have images of both, but I don't want to upset anybody. Would you like me to show them, or should I can put them in, I can put the links in the chat. Was that better?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's probably better. Mhm. All right, well, here's one. These are the jumpers. The jumpers, so I think around a couple, maybe 200 people jumped from the towers. And there were a couple pictures. The one that I'm showing you there, I believe it even got a title afterwards, like called Falling Man or something. And interestingly, it was shared in a couple of, similar to the severed hand, it made its way into some publications and then was immediately like stopped. It was not spread at all. Okay. The severed hand, here, I'm going to put that one in here for you now, is pretty graphic, I'm warning you. Okay. It's amazing. I guess I should not be surprised. It's amazing what you can find online. um, so my question for you, why were these images stopped from circulation?
Are we going to talk about good taste now?
Whatever you want it. I actually was not thinking of framing it in the topic of good taste. I have another way to approach this topic, but I just want to know, you can answer whatever way you want. You know, why do you think this did not make it? Why do you think the press, the American press, said, whoa, too much?
It's because it indicated that it's even why they called them, I mean, they ended up calling them different names, but it's the resistance to wanting to address or acknowledge suicide. And from a largely Christian-based nation, suicide means that you're going to hell. So there was a large outcry about calling them jumpers because it means that they chose to jump, which means that they chose suicide. And so there was this kind of like back and forth. And regardless, like suicide as a national topic in mainstream media is like very, very, very rare to bring up. Because of kind of like traditional Christian values that are kind of super deeply rooted in this country. I personally think.
Interesting. I've not heard that argument before. I understand it, but I haven't heard that justification before.
It's one of the reasons why suicide in general, why it's so much harder to get kind of like suicide prevention. Like it took so long to get kind of the general promotion of suicide hotlines and advertising for like help if you were thinking suicidal thoughts, because there's kind of a backlash from Christian groups. It's just kind of one of the more suppressed ways that people kill, ways of dying that our nation doesn't really publicly address. Out of that reason, and then there's the other fear of like copycatting.
Okay, thank you.
I think the press stopped to post those pictures is because probably it's not good for their public format, like their wait, I have to search that word. The public image, because it is not for the press is not some I don't know, something really polite or respect for those people who died in the pictures. And when they post it, like people's comment is not something polite.
It seems disrespectful.
Yeah, is disrespectful for those people who died.
Excellent.
And then it is not good for the press's company's public image. So
Excellent.
yeah, so they will not post it.
Okay, that's very good. I have a question for everybody. Is this disrespectful?
That's not in America.
This is a man captured in the moment of death. Yeah. This raises the issue of the racial topic that she mentions, right? We're okay seeing, when I've approached this issue, I've approached it more from this angle. Like there are certain dead people where we can fathom, and there's certain dead people we can't. And 9/11, although I find your argument very interesting, Babette, I have taken a different approach. I just think these are, it cuts too close to home for white people. These are white people dying. The man falling is in a suit and tie, right? This is a businessman, for Christ's sake,
Well, actually, interestingly, they found out later, and there's like a whole documentary about it, that actually he's wearing a chef's coat.
Oh,
And so then there was like thought that he was actually not white. He was actually Latino and working in one of the restaurants. And so there was a lot of like that going on, and they like tracked the family, and there was just like, it was just like a whole documentary where this team like wanted to identify this person.
yeah, I saw that online. I didn't watch it, but I saw there's a documentary. Well, there are a couple pictures of the falling people, you know, that's
Yeah.
one, but there were a couple in their suits and whatnot. But I mean, you guys were pretty young, I imagine, when 9/11 happened. I was your age, or well, I'm lying. I was like 30 at the time. And my first teaching job, I remember I was teaching class, and it was called out of class to be told, right? That's one of those things, you know, you always know where you were when ... right? And I remember the few days after 9/11, we'll never forget, like, it was very, you had to be, you know, we were so traumatized as a nation, you know, like you were not allowed to, you know, there were images that were barred because it was just too sensitive, right? It was too raw, right? We couldn't see that. We couldn't see the images of these guys jumping, you know. Strange, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of that one section in the book where I forget where it was exactly, but it was this person. She like gives Sontag gives like an anecdote of a person like seeing footage and being like, oh, that's like not close, like that's in a different country, and then like it would come closer and it's like, oh, well, that's like, you know, yeah, that far away, and then it actually like, and so there was this like ability to, yeah, like observe it from a less like personal place, until it actually like affected them, you know, in their real life, or everyday life, I guess I should say. And you know, it's something like, maybe that's something similar where it's, yeah, just like too close to home, to like,
There were 3,000 people killed in 9/11, right? 3,000. Okay. In the war in Iraq that started largely because of the 9/11 attacks as a pretext in 2003 and pretty much raged 2011, the UN speculates that the number of civilian casualties in Iraq is in the order of 300,000 to 500,000 people. 300,000 to 500,000, right? So that's, you know, that's remote. And you know, I agree. Or Rosemary, I'm just, you know, I would cite that example as something that could substantiate Sontag's claim, right? We're able to tolerate it when it's far away, but when it's right in our midst, you know, this is less satisfactory, acceptable. The issue, of course, Jay points out, this is raised under the question of good taste. So we did not circulate those images widely because of good taste. What should we say about that? How much good taste does the US press, does the American press have? Are we really that concerned with good taste? Here I have something else I'm going to show you.
Good taste in the racial sense.
In the racial sense, yeah. Here I have another image to show you. This is from Kill Bill. My movie knowledge is not great. This is Uma Thurman chopping off a head. I don't like Quentin Tarantino. I think my kids made me watch this movie. And this scene in particular is kind of crazy because she chops off this heads and the blood just starts spurting. They become like a fountain, each one. This is the end. When she's done, this is so here's my question for you all, everybody. This is our entertainment in America. I'm trying to figure out that point the right way. This is our entertainment in America, and we can't take falling man and the severed hand. What's up with that?
There's been research that says that when you're watching a movie, there is a suspended disbelief where you can accept things that normally you can't accept. So that's, I think, like movies in
even more so than photographs, it feels almost like it's not as
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of brought this up in my discussion post about like, yeah, this disconnect between what is shown via internet entertainment and then what is censored in real life. And yeah, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. Actually, yeah.
I mean, I would put the question this way. How is the American viewing public suddenly so squeamish? You know, we have no problem with this kind of stuff. How are we suddenly so squeamish we can't see, you know, we're not even treated to the pictures of our own war dead? Or how about, let me put the question to you this, guys. Does this kind of stuff, does Hollywood make us ill prepared to view the real thing? What do you think about that? Can we agree that Hollywood likes violence?
I was going to say, I don't know if it makes us ill prepared, but it certainly it numbs us and desensitizes us. So, I mean, yeah, that those are the things that I think Hollywood does. I mean, obviously Hollywood's addicted to violence, but so are news channels and media, and you know, they also desensitize us with photography that's just as kind of like violent. So it's not like we're not seeing violence and blood and gore on news. It's like a particular type of violence, which is like extremely, like either like Sontag talks about, like the actual face of a soldier, for example, like that's out of like respect for the family in that sense. But then, you know, the hand is also considered like out of respect of whoever's body it was attached to. I don't know. It's just that kind of thing.
It's funny. I had a thought before class. I was looking at that. So she mentions a severed hand. So I went on Google. I Googled 9/11 severed hand. And the first image came up. I thought immediately, oh, that's not a real hand. That's a prop. And then I realized, oh, that's the hand, all right. And then I thought, what if I show the class a picture of a severed hand, like from a movie prop, you know, like, and I told you that was the picture from 9/11, right? Then you might say, get rid of it. Don't want to see it, right? My point being, like, when we know the context, that changes things, right? I get maybe that's not such an aha moment, but at the time I was like, that's kind of weird, you know? If we know that this is related to something serious and something real, that will change. Oh, we should treat that with respect, you know? It's very strange. Blythe, I don't know this. Would you like to tell us about this film that you're mentioning in the chat?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in the first week, but it's a film that Alfredo Yar made like during COVID of like the mass graves in New York City, and he put different music over it for different countries affected by America being at war with them, and was like, if this was any other country other than our own, this would be like all over our like news feeds.
Interesting. Who was talking about that earlier in class? Kat, was that you? Someone was talking about this.
Yeah,
Was this the same one? Kat, is that the same video?
It's possible, but I'm
Well,
not
now
sure.
you have the link. You can check it out.
Yeah, sorry if it was, and sorry for being late.
Oh, no, don't worry about it, Clyde. Thank you. It's awesome now. We have the link for it. Thank you. By the way, we brought Alfredo jar to Mike a few years ago. I am just for my own curiosity, I'm just curious, how many of you looked at the severed hand picture I sent? Just one person is admitting it. Nobody else looked. 2 people. Interesting.
I had a similar experience as you, Furman. Like I wasn't, I mean, maybe because you prepared me or because but I was like, I wasn't that, yeah, it looked like, I mean, it could have very well been a prop. Like they showed things like that in movies and TV shows all the time.
Yeah, they do.
Like exactly like that.
Oh my God. Can I tell you, like, I do not watch mainstream TV. I don't watch much TV at all. But can I tell you, there are like these forensic shows now, these forensic police shows. There's one that really annoys me. This girl, she's like punk rock and she has like dark colored braids and tattoos and she's so hip. Oh my God. And they're like flirting and they're flirting over a fucking corpse lying in front of them that they're going to be like, oh, see the fracture here. The one thing, okay, guys, the one thing I do watch, I watch murder mysteries. There you have it. And so it's amazing what we're able to tolerate. Like we'll laugh over that kind of stuff. We'll joke over that kind of stuff. But boy, when this hand is related to someone, it's attached to someone, forget it. Right.
When I was small, I actually lived in front of an auntie who raised pigs for slaughter. I lived in a village, and I looked at it for a very brief moment, and honestly, I felt a little sick, and it did remind me of that moment, and I kind of walked in on one of the slaughters, and it was not a fun time.
Sorry. I have to tell you guys, on that note, I have a real problem. I never know whether to show gore with students. You know what I mean? Like, I've had this problem for years, right? I mean, a few years when I first started teaching, I was showing the movie Gladiator. I don't know if you guys know the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and he's like beheading people. And I was like, I said a warning to the class, and then they watched it and they were kind of like cheering and stuff. I was like, maybe I didn't need to warn them, but I never know whether to give a warning for gore and violence with younger students, because part of the reason is I take for granted that many young people, this is par for the course, right? There's violence oozing out of all our entertainment, movies, TV. Should we talk about video games? I mean, Christ. I don't know if there's any video game aficionados here. I know zero about video games. Zero, nothing. But I do know they're violent, right? So anybody have any general comments for me that can help me?
I think, I don't know, because I'm a huge fan of like some PUBG or some shooting video games and horror movies, some bloody things, I don't know. But it makes people like, I don't know, excited. It sounds like some abnormal people, but no. But in the real life, I cannot like cut off like a dead chicken's head, something like that. So it's more about it's about like the feeling, or it shows us like the cruel thing as a funniest way. Like when people die, they will blow up a fire or something like that. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Blythe. I see your comments there. It varies. Yeah, it varies. for sure. And I'm always surprised, you know, but you know, it just makes the point, like entertainment, violence for entertainment is not something that prepares us for the real deal. And I leave it with the question of, is it a disservice? The word that Babette used is, does it desensitize us? You know, I'm going to tie things together here so that we can finish. You know, I think one of the major issues in claim, you know, problems that came out today, a couple things, but one in particular that really sticks in my mind is, you know, if photographs are memory freeze frames, if they're what help us remember, you know, what happens in the digital age when we are flooded with images all the time at all angles? You know, we had a discussion today about the Afghan war, which has been going on for 20 years. I was asked about if there were any iconic images of the Afghan war, and really we could come up with anything, much of anything. You know, is it a generational thing? Is photographs as memory freeze frames, is this are they a casualty of digital technology now? And what does that mean for memory going forward? You know, what does that mean for pictorial memory? You know, is pictorial memory undermined? What does it mean for memory of searing events? How will we remember the COVID epidemic 10, 20 years from now? Maybe it will not be in terms of, you know, these iconic images that circulate in the press. Maybe it will not be in terms of collective memory. Maybe it'll be in terms of just, you know, your personal memory, right? Like, God, I remember when I got that shot, or I remember the day I had to lock the door and stay inside, or I remember the day my classes were closed, I had to move out of my apartment or dormitory. You know, maybe that's, you know, when the photograph is undermined, when the power of the photograph is undermined in the internet, in the digital age, you know, do we fall back on older forms of individual memory, right? Maybe it's less collective. This is the last point I'll make. You know, in the current news environment, you know, there's a lot of partisanship, there's a lot of conspiracy theory, right? QAnon, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason that we, you know, some analysts say we are in this age is because, you know, the news and landscape is so fragmented. You can get your news from anywhere. You can find, if you have a crackpot idea, you can find a news source, quote unquote news source out there to validate it. The Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War, you got your news from exactly 4 outlets. Just imagine, 4. Basta, that was it, no more. In other words, the United States was learning about that war and remembering it in stunningly collective fashion, right? Which is not the case anymore, right? The digital technology has really fragmented the media landscape, you know, maybe fatally so. And I don't not know what that means for how we remember things going forward, you know? Right now, in this country, we're dealing with half the country thinks Trump was the greatest thing ever. My dad has a farm in Pennsylvania, and they love him up there. And the neighbor has a sign that says, "Thank God for President Trump." Thank God. My father, he nearly has a stroke every time he drives by that fucking poster. And then meanwhile, here in our Micah bubble, we're like, that was the worst guy ever. We narrowly avoided fascism, right? The media landscape supports both right now. I wonder how we're going to remember this going forward. What will be the lasting image of Trump? Will it be him giving that speech before his giant red face? Remember, but right before the Capitol insurrection, he was giving a speech and his giant red face was behind him, almost Big Brother style, you know, and then they charged, you know, him coming down the escalator. There might be a couple. Now that I think about it, there might be a couple collective images that are seared in our brains about the Trump experience. And that might mediate our memory going forward. That might hold it together. That might give it some kind of collective identity. Any case. That's it for today, guys. Okay, I'm going to tie it up there. but I will stick around if anybody needs to chat with me. Okay.
Oh, can we meet after class? Like,
Absolutely.
thank you.
All right. See you later, everybody. Have a great week. So
Bye.
read bell hooks for next week and email me about your papers if ideas come to you. Oh, and Blythe, Blythe, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, I went over the paper topics. I forgot to record that section, but
Okay.
if you would kindly go over the paper topics under module 15
Mhm.
and let me know if you have any questions.
Yep.
Your big task in the next few weeks, in addition to reading our last few readings, is I want you to
Yeah.
start emailing me paper topic ideas, and
Okay.
I'll help you land on one or sharpen one.
Okay. I'm
Right.
really sorry about being
Okay.
late. My appointment, there was an emergency in the surgery that I was popping into today. So my 11 a.m. appointment turned into a 1:15 p.m. appointment, which
That's
was
fine.
yeah.
I'm glad you could join us for a little bit, but just read up on the final paper directions if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
I also have a doctor's note if you'd like one. But
Please,
yeah.
that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Yes,
Bye.
Jennifer, hi.
Hi, my question is, I noticed like in this in the discussion of this week, like everyone has the example of some wars, but my example is a Indonesian photographer like manipulating and abusing animals to take his like photograph, and his photograph had the award of from the National Geography magazine, I think. So is that okay?
Of course. That sounds great. Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, because I'm really afraid that I will not graduate like normally graduate. So
Oh,
yeah, and I
No.
already has like the appointment to the writing studio for my final paper.
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you an undergraduate?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, as I emailed you earlier, you only need to pass this class is only pass fail actually, but you need a B to pass, and you're getting a B so far.
Yeah, but it's the line, like the line for the pass. So I'm really panicked right now.
Well, you're not the only one who's in there. You're not the lowest grade in the class, so I think you'll be okay. You'll be fine.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
that. Okay. Thank you.
But as long as you work with the writing studio, that could be very helpful. And so I think in your case, maybe writing your paper nice and early so you can meet with them maybe even twice, you know?
Yeah, I'm planning to have 2 appointments for the final paper.
That's good.
Because
I know.
I have the appointment, I think it's April, it's next week, next Monday, to give the draft of like the first draft of my final paper, and then get the another writing studio help for like the final one. So
Well, is that for this class? Because that's a little early. You don't even have a topic with me yet.
yeah, because I need to plan early because I have flight and
Well, then you should email me very soon about your paper topic.
yeah, sure, I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. I'll see you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.